March 25, 1475. The chambers of the castle of Amboise are steeped in the heavy silence of expectation. You can almost feel the walls vibrating with the quiet breaths of those gathered, witnesses to the event that will alter the course of kingdoms. In the dim light of flickering torches, a girl stands at the threshold, her heart racing, her body trembling. She is Anne of Brittany, a mere 14 years old, adorned in the sumptuous finery of a bride, a complex gown of rich gold and silken green that whispers of both opulence and encumbrance. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and distant flowering shrubs, mingled with the sweat of apprehension. Today is not merely a wedding. It is the culmination of a political alliance forged in the fires of conflict and ambition. Around her the nobles murmur prayers and incantations, their eyes alight with a mix of hope and hunger. For Anne, this marriage is a pawn in a game far beyond her youthful comprehension, a means to unite two powerful realms, the Duchy of Brittany and the Kingdom of France. Beside her, King Charles VIII stands tall, his 20-year-old frame a mask of solemnity. His presence is both a promise and a threat, embodying the weight of expectation. As the last echoes of the ceremonial blessing fade into the stone walls, Anne is led to the bedding chamber, the heart of this marriage pact. The steps are heavy, each one echoing the burdens placed on her young shoulders. Outside the door, soldiers take their posts, and within, the air grows thick with apprehension, a claustrophobic reminder of the scrutiny that looms over them. They enter an act that transcends romance, one that is steeped in duty and the grim acknowledgement of its brutality. Torn from her youthful dreams, this night will test not her vows of love, but the fabric of dynastic politics. You can hear the creaking of the bed as it bears witness, the rustling of linen against skin, the prayers of those standing vigil outside, mixing with the sounds of bound duty. Those tasked to observe are not merely voyeurs. They are sentinels, a network of nobles and clergy, ensuring that the consummation is not only performed, but audibly confirmed. It is an examination of flesh and blood, designed to fortify a union that has been stipulated in treaties and negotiations behind closed doors, far from the innocent imaginings of the girl now trapped within. And yet, for Anne, there is no escape. The echoes of laughter from outside ring hollow now, replaced by the stark reality that her body will become the currency of peace. In the Hall of Records, there are men that will savor this night as fulfillment, and she cannot fathom the price that she must pay. Each gasp, each flinch will be logged. Each moment counted toward the legitimacy of the alliance her marriage represents. Awash in terror, she lay beneath the weight of expectation and the scrutiny of eyes that see her not as a child but as a vessel. But this night will not last for the duration of mere hours. It will stretch into a forced vigil, lasting an entire week. The records from this encounter, written in terse Latin, insist that the marriage shall be consummated, and this is not merely for the sake of romance or intimacy. It is a grim ritual that demands validation. Between each act, physicians will inspect her. They will record her physiological responses, watching for signs of arousal, scrutinizing her in a contract that demands she perform her role. Even if her youth renders her unprepared, their task will be to ensure the full course is fulfilled, every nuance of her body transformed into proof of allegiance. And in those 7 days that follow, Anne will endure what no child should ever bear. Beneath the careful watch of women who are sworn to secrecy and men who believe this procedure ensures stability for the kingdom, she becomes an unwilling participant in a policy designed to preserve power through lineage. Each night, she undergoes the rites. She is not simply bound to a husband, but is physically imprisoned in the concept of alliance. They chant hymns and recite blessings. she silently questions the depth of her own humanity. The voices of the court return to their feast and merriment outside the chamber, blissfully ignorant of the turmoil unfolding within. Their satisfaction lies in the paperwork that will follow, the ink that seals an alliance validated by the validation of her body. But for Anne, every breath becomes a reminder of her solitude within this embrace, devoid of warmth or tenderness. The very design of this kingdom echoes far beyond her individual pain, transforming her suffering into a bargaining chip for sovereignty. When the doors finally open after those 7 interminable days, none who gaze upon her can fully grasp the toll it has taken. Her fragile frame appears weakened, her spirit diminished. Yet, the records document a successful consummation. Letters announce the completion of their duty. King Charles interacts with her with distant warmth, but their paths are forever altered. This brutal intertwining of necessity and childhood becomes her solitary truth and her burden to bear. What happens next is not just a mere footnote in history, but a legacy that haunts the corridors of power, an account that speaks to all the young girls forced into political marriages throughout the ages. For Anne of Brittany, married to a king but never truly seen as his queen in heart, stands as a representation of the sacrifices made at the altar of political ambition. Though she later bears children, her first marriage becomes an imprint upon her spirit, a reminder that in the kingdoms forged through blood, it is the innocence of youth that pays the highest price. This was not just Anne's fate. Numerous young noblewomen were subjected to similar fates across Europe as alliances shifted and loyalties turned. The practice of systematic betting and examination ritual, frequently documented across various kingdoms, served as a grim testament to the lengths dynasties would go to ensure their pillars of power remained unshaken. To understand this history is to confront the chilling reality of those who lived through it. Girls turned into the currency of politics, their sorrows erased from the annals of history, reduced to mere records on parchment. So as the ink dried on Anne's fate, it spelled out not a singular tale isolated in time, but part of a continuum cascading across centuries. The grim reality behind such marriages endured long after her story came to an echoing close. Today, echoes of the past still reverberate, reminding us that the foundations of power often come at a price that many will pay. Innocence sacrificed on the altar of ambition. In the end, history is not merely written. It is etched into the lives of those who lived it. From their suffering, we learn the depths of human cruelty wrapped in the guise of necessity, reminding us that the past is never truly gone. It can only be unearthed, felt, and, hopefully, understood. Even as the doors of the chamber swung open and Anne emerged after those agonizing 7 days, the echoes of her suffering were just beginning to reverberate beyond the walls of the castle. Unbeknownst to her, the horror of what she had experienced was not an isolated event, but part of an expansive and deeply entrenched system that transcended individual experiences. This grim ritual, intended to secure treaties and forge political alliances, was not unique to Brittany and France, but echoed through the courts of Europe. As historians delved into the archival records from the late 15th century, they began to uncover outlines of a vast, systematized practice that affected countless young women across kingdoms. By the late 1400s, such betting ceremonies became a normalized instrument of political power, executed with clinical precision. In 1485, records from the Papal States revealed cases where similar practices were meticulously documented, with local officials ensuring the consummation of marriages serving as vital to the legitimacy of dynastic claims. Here, the currency was also not gold or land, but the bodies of brides like Anne, held hostage by the imperatives of power. Within a decade of Anne's marriage, new tablets were unearthed at the Benedictine monastery of Santa Croce during excavations in 2016. These had chilling inscriptions detailing the protocols governing royal bedding rituals, dating back to 1060. The newfound tablets recorded the names of 50 young brides married into powerful families, with specific notes on the duration of their bedding periods. Many were subjected to night after night of examination, and the chilling protocol outlined that if a marriage was not consummated within 3 attempts, the wedding would be deemed invalid, this forcing families to continually seek new unions, lest they lose their political alliances. The fragile intersection between personal autonomy and political necessity became a harsh reality for these young women, similarly lost in a sacrificial system. But this was just the beginning. By 1495, as Geoffrey Partington uncovered at the National Archive in Florence, legal reforms integrated the practice into constitutional law in various Italian city-states. Matrimonial bonds were subject to rigorous scrutiny. It was now required that in every union, a council of elders and local ecclesiastical representatives would document the consummation. The implications shifted the practice from a social formality to a legal mandate, increasing the numbers of women involved. Estimates by the early 1500s would place this at 120 women annually across the region. Transitioning from the tangible horror of the marriage ceremony into its embedded acceptance, the evolving cultural attitudes toward these practices marked a dark normalization of trauma. Official correspondences from noble households documented that the bedding ceremony was often celebrated with grand feasts, a grim spectacle that the nobles encouraged. In 1498, correspondence from the Duchy of Bavaria revealed, "Let it not be said that our reunions lack festivity, for what is more joyous than ensuring our bloodlines remain strong?" The sheer detachment from the suffering experienced by young girls was staggering. This was no longer a one-night ordeal. The societal embrace of these practices was affirmed by the shifting narratives found in manuscripts. By the early 1500s, authors like Eberhard von Schmitz, writing in a collection titled The Ritual of Dynasties, posited that the ceremonial aspect was not merely necessary for political gain, but integral to social stability. "These acts signify unity," he wrote, failing to comprehend that behind such proclamations lay the horror of coercion, woven into the very fabric of their economy. In these same letters, notations on how many tools were to be kept clean for subsequent bedding evenings seemed bereft of any recognition of their implications. The geographic scope of these practices widened too. By the turn of the 16th century, documentation by clerics in central France showcased that extended provinces were all complicit in marrying off young tributary girls, not only for their connections, but their fertility. The records revealed a staggering increase from 200 young brides in the mid-1480s to approximately 600 by 1500. Die 1000. This increase did not arise from chance. It was the fruit of a meticulously crafted bureaucratic system that exploited the bodies of the young, hailed as legitimate by the bleary-eyed spectators who blinded themselves to their plight. Not only did the physical toll on these girls escalate, but the situation had bred societal expectations that continued to compound distress. The demographic repercussions were becoming clear by the onset of the 16th century. Scholars found evidence of declining birth rates within certain aristocratic families. The census of 1505 for the Duchy of Bavaria captured a profound reality. Where there were once vibrant communities with growing families, now there were clusters of barren estates. The terrifying realization was that these women, caught in a perpetual cycle of disillusionment and trauma, were yielding fewer heirs. Historical estimates indicated that during this time nearly a quarter of marriages failed to produce children, a direct consequence of the psychological degradation of young brides forced into unions devoid of affection. Even as the practice spread through political circles, rather than being condemned, it slowly transformed into a societal norm, burrowed deeply into the consciousness of those who were supposed to uphold the sanctity of the institution. In a grim irony, parliamentary discussions in 1515 revealed widespread debates concerning how to further formalize the ceremony, treating it as nothing more than a transactional occurrence, one not merely required, but gleefully anticipated. Records from the Château de Blois document a provincial assembly. The bedding must be marked by ecstasy fit for a monarch. Let our families flourish through these pacts, hence amplifying the veneer of merriment surrounding brutal practice. The true horror lies not just in the systematic emotional and physical struggles faced by these women, but in the complicity of society at large. Correspondences recovered from the royal family archives paint a portrait of a court steeped in bloodlines and marital strategies, devoid of empathy. In a 1522 letter to a royal cousin, Anne herself mused dramatically, "The burdens of girlhood are not for the hands of power, but the chains of dignity." The normalization of this horror reached an apex as some regions began offering incentives to families for yielding their daughters into such unions. In 1530, financial ledgers from the German Duchy of Brunswick indicated bounties issued for each year a girl remained unmarried, with estimates indicating they could total nearly 1,000 florins per family. The desensitization of society toward marriage as currency perpetuated the cycle of trauma across generations. This was no longer simply a matter of marriage. It became a transactional economy that corrupted even familial love. In the meticulous bureaucratic network supporting this institution, the transformed dynamics of power birthed an unsettling expectation. The ultimate validation of marriage as an act of power was no longer the consummation, but the aftermath, a legacy of compliance suffocated under the weight of an emerging social contract that echoed into the centuries. As the walls of castles spoke of alliances and political gambits, the echoes of those young girls like Anne of Brittany were often lost, haunted by the burden of hope entwined with their duress. Such was the fabric of history, embroidered with voices unheard and experiences that went unchecked. Ultimately, the legacy of Anne's story was not limited to her initial marriage ceremony. Instead, it became a part of a continuum reflecting a societal malaise wherein young lives were sacrificed at the altars of ambition and lineage. History teaches not only of alliances sealed in blood, but of the insidious, indelible marks it leaves on the hearts and spirits of those involved, reminding generations that the cost of power is forever encumbered by the loss of innocence. In this vast constellation of human experience, the stories written in the straight lines of legal documents, the flourishing of political discourse, and the haunting silences of those who paid the price are forever intertwined. The facts emerge, layered and tragic, underscoring that the past is indeed prologue, and not simply an echo that fades with time. In 2023, the sprawling grounds of the Château d'Amboise became the focus of an archaeological recovery effort initiated by the French Ministry of Culture. After years of speculation surrounding the brutal legacy of political marriages, the excavation team set their sights on unearthing layers of the castle's past that had long been buried beneath centuries of soil. As the team carefully removed sediment from an overlooked section of the castle grounds, they discovered a hidden chamber, unsealed for the first time in nearly 500 years. The moment crackled with electrifying potential as they broke through the final encasement of stone and earth. The chamber beyond lay shrouded in darkness, a long-forgotten relic of a tapestry woven with ancient agony and subjugation. Inside, 57 skeletons, many of them children, ages 8 to 16. Side by side they rested, their bones carrying the indelible marks of trauma, each small skull revealing signs of forced labor, malnutrition, and violence. The excavation team stood aghast as they began to document their findings. It was here that the archaeologists found dozens of inscribed clay tablets nestled among the bones. The inscriptions chronicled the chamber's purpose as a ceremonial space dedicated to the marriage rituals of not just Anne of Brittany, but countless other noblewomen whose suffering had been rendered invisible by history's neglect. Each carving told of nights spent under oppressive eyes, of bodies treated as currency rather than vessels of life and emotion. Inscriptions matched descriptions from historical sources, including accounts from chronicler Philippe de Comines, who wrote of the practices associated with vital political unions among noble families that permeated his era. The tablets revealed a staggering statistic. More than 200 women were processed here per year, many of whom were not recognized in the annals of regional history, their torment buried alongside them for generations. For Anne, trapped and isolated during her wedding night, this chamber had been a grim venue where young girls were subjected to bureaucratic assessments, their worth measured only in the context of dynastic consolidation. By the turn of the 16th century, Amboise Castle's once vibrant halls echoed with laughter and revelry. Yet the marriage alliances were fragile. By 1500, political tensions erupted into local skirmishes, and many prominent families, stripped of their young women, faced decline. By 1550, famine struck Brittany, leading to civil unrest as the lineage promised through marriage all but crumbled. The consequence of these unions became painfully clear. By 1580, populations decreased sharply, as records reflected only half the previous counts from a few decades prior. The castle, once a seat of power for the alliances forged through marriage, began to show signs of decay. By 1600, most noble families had migrated away, leaving behind an empty shell of sumptuous courts and grand chambers, no longer bolstered by the alliances that had once filled its halls. It echoed through history, a quiet specter that spoke to the fate of those utilized as pawns in a grim game of power. By the mid-17th century, the last noble families departed, and what remained of the castle was repurposed. It stood dilapidated, its once majestic structure stripped of grandeur. Remnants of external conflicts and internal betrayal manifested in the form of abandoned remains scattered among the countryside. The city that had once teemed with life dwindled, unaware of the perilous spiral they had entered. Cowed by hunger and political upheaval, the land suffered a progressive deterioration, revealing itself as a canvas of decay, ultimately succumbing to obscurity. The legacy uncovered through excavation shows vivid patterns in history's relentless machinery. The normalization of violence through marital pacts, the commodifying of youth under the guise of noble duty, and the tragic loss of countless lives. Rendered invisible, patterns resound in modern contexts, as seen in various documented practices. The bureaucratic structures serving atrocities ring familiar, suggesting we are still haunted by frameworks of power. The institutions that coalesce around children suffering recur throughout history, evident in records like those from the Turkish government during the Armenian Genocide 1915, the Khmer Rouge era in Cambodia 1975 to 1979, and more recently, reported abuses in contexts such as North Korea's oppressive regime. If you found the history of Anne and the practices surrounding her marriage compelling, consider subscribing to our channel for more immersive narratives exploring the shadows of the past. It is through understanding our history that we illuminate the often ignored experiences of those who have suffered, so that their voices echo, not in silence, but in reflection.